Mining was not something that Brigham Young wanted for the Utah Territory because of the outside element it would attract. Not so for Colonel Patrick Connor, stationed at Fort Douglas. His goal was to excite a rush of non-Mormons into the territory. That was why, when some of his soldiers discovered silver in Parley's Park in 1868, word traveled fast. When the Transcontinental Railroad was completed at Promontory Point in northern Utah in 1869, a lot of laid-off railroad workers headed to Park City. Incorporated in 1872, for the next 100 years, 253 million ounces of silver, 1.45 million ounces of gold, along with lead, zinc, and copper were taken out of the surrounding mountains. Now, thanks to the winter ski industry and the Sundance Film Festival, the money is flowing into the much sought-after real estate. Now those old mining trails are being used for hiking and bike riding. Let's explore a couple of tragedies that time has almost forgotten, buried 6 feet underground. On July 15, 1902, there was a mining disaster at the Daly West mine, which, if we look up there, it's right center of the camera, is where the Daly West is. That was owned by John Daly. And what happened on that fateful day in 1902 was a ammunitions or an explosives bunker 1,200 feet underground, 1,200 feet underground, exploded. And from the explosion, several fissures were opened up in the cracks in the mining walls, and toxic gases and fumes entered the mine. And depending upon which source you read, it's anywhere between 28 and 34 victims. But right here we have the gravestones of 7 of those victims. There's actually 8 graves here, but only 7 have markers on them. You notice the date? Let's move in on one of these. July 15th, 1902. These two are brothers, the Devlin brothers. There was one miner who had only been working at the mine for a couple weeks. He had come over from Ireland. And 2 weeks before this incident, he rescued his father, who was trapped inside of a mine. And then on this occasion, on July 15th, he was rescuing miners when he was overcome by the gases, and other rescuers tried to rescue him, but they were unable to lift him and carry him out. And so he perished after saving half a dozen lives. Because of this incident, the Miners Union abolished the practice of storing explosives underground. Glenwood Cemetery in Park City. A lot of people mistakenly figure that this cemetery is the oldest cemetery in Park City, and that is incorrect. Actually, this cemetery is about 5 or 6 years younger than the main cemetery on Kearns Boulevard. And this cemetery was set up for people of low income. You notice the rustic look of this cemetery. And it's not uncommon to come into this cemetery with all the trees and the grass and whatnot and find deer bedded down. High school kids tend to cut through this cemetery on the way to school. But the grave that we're going to is for Jenny Hover, August 17th, 1892. Jenny Hover, after her husband left the house and went to work at the Empire Mine, which was owned by George Hearst. Jenny, let's go around the other way. Jenny called over the neighbor's 14-year-old daughter and asked and told the girl that she wasn't feeling very well, and asked the girl to sit with her for a while. What transpired prior to that date, this is where Jenny was buried. What transpired to that date was Jenny found out that she was not going to be able to bear children. And this sent her into a deep depression. So much so that on the morning of August 17, 1892, she had taken a dose of strychnine prior to calling over the neighbor's daughter. She asked the neighbor's daughter to just sit with her for a while because she wasn't feeling well. But after a while, her symptoms got worse. Convulsions started. And that's when she confessed to the 14-year-old girl that she was dying, and she just didn't want to die alone. She needed somebody to be with her. The girl got frightened, ran out, and sought help from other housewives in the area, who started administering tea to calm her stomach, and they sent for the doctor. When the doctor arrived, he quickly discerned what the problem was, and he called for the police. The police sent for her husband to get off shift at the Empire Mine, and shortly after her husband arrived, Jenny expired. When the police interviewed the husband, they asked him why he thought that his wife would commit suicide. And he stated, in his opinion, it was because he was too much of a man, and that his manhood slowly sapped away her energy every time they had intercourse. Stop and think about that for a second. Jenny found out she couldn't have any kids, and yet her husband still wanted to have intimacy. Jenny couldn't have kids, so in her mind it didn't make any sense to have marital relations with her husband if there was nothing to be produced from it. So therefore, every time his attentions were stirred up, yes, she died a little bit until the despair became too much for her and she took her own life.